Here we go. I'm going to be going over some team activities, group building, team building, things that can be good for practicing things like nonverbal communication. Also, just fun stuff to do with students or adults. First one I want to go over is a game called Ask for Help. It's used with a rope. I have this handy dandy schematic drawn right here. And so basically what you do is you have posts or trees represented by green dots, and you tie a rope to them in a maze, but there's no end to this maze. It just sends people around again. And what you do is you blindfold students who want to participate, and you have them grab onto the rope with one hand or two hands, and you instruct them to find the end of the rope. And once they find the end of the rope, they have succeeded and completed the challenge. However, there is no end to the rope, right? So since they're blindfolded, they'll never see that. They don't know there's no end to the rope. So it's very crucial that you don't let the students see this setup before you go there. Like blindfold them before they get to the maze. So you see they're moving around this maze like this one I have drawn here. I drew little stick figures that are moving around. And you say to them, if you need help, raise your hand and I'll help you. And you'll see no one will do anything. And then you'll say again, hey, if you need help, raise your hand and I'll help you. And when a student raises their hand, you go over to them and you'll maybe sneak their blindfold down a little bit and you'll go, and then motion to them to come with you. And then once they're far enough away from the group, you say, all you had to do was ask for help to get out of the maze. And then that student gets to watch their friends go around the maze, but never actually find the end of it. And it's quite entertaining. And as other people raise their hands, because you keep prompting the whole time, if you need help, raise your hand and I will help you. You can do the same thing where you grab the student and they've completed the challenge, and then they get to watch the students who are then left struggling to find the end to a maze that doesn't have an end. And this activity is really great for debriefing afterwards and saying, like, sometimes we need to ask for help. Like, you just can't do it by yourself. Like, this task is impossible. But when you ask for help, all of a sudden you succeed. And this can be used with students who have a hard time speaking the common language in class, right? To try to encourage them to ask for help. It can also be great for students who maybe have like a big ego and they don't want to ask for help. It's also just really hilarious. The tragic thing is once you do it once, you can never do it again with the same group of students. So really like pick your time to do it. Make sure your students trust you and that they're not going to peek out of their blindfolds or whatever. All right, on to the next activity. This one's called Chocolate River. This is the setup. So basically you have two ropes represented by the black lines and two teams. And those teams are trying to get from one side of the chocolate river to the other. So in between the ropes is a river full of fast-flowing, hot, molten chocolate. And the teams are lined up right here and right here. They're trying to get to the other side. Each team has an equal number of what we call marshmallows because you put marshmallows in hot chocolate. And that marshmallow could be a frisbee, it could be a piece of cardboard, it could be a rubber mat. It needs to be something for somebody to stand on. And what they have to do is they have to use those to get across the chocolate river. So you see how they can only stand on the marshmallows as they cross? The trick here is if a marshmallow is not being stood on, if it's not touched by a human being, the chocolate river will sweep the marshmallow away, and the teacher will then go up and grab the marshmallow and say like, oh, it's washed away into the chocolate river. And it reduces the number of marshmallows that team has. And sometimes it'll strand somebody in the middle of the river. And it also makes it way more of a strategic game because the students have to work together to ensure that nobody is leaving a marshmallow in the river without somebody's foot on it or hand, right? Because then it just washes away. And you can see in this picture, I have their legs spanning the marshmallow and they're passing it to their friend at the end. That's a good strategy, right? That's how you get across the chocolate river. And it can take a few tries, and if a person falls into the chocolate river, then that person has to go back into the line over here and try to get across again. First team to get across the chocolate river will win the contest or win the activity. And then a good way to spice this one up is once they've done it once, and the teams that have been designated by the teacher have made it across, you can say, we are going to do it again, but this time, no talking. And when you add that element, it gives a really even playing field to a lot of the students, because some students might be shy and not want to speak up. You'll have students who are natural leaders, or maybe students that have a hard time speaking that language. It doesn't matter. It really builds on nonverbal communication, and that's something that you can talk about afterwards, like debriefing the activity. It's important to debrief the activity and talk about communication, and talk about how some of the most powerful communication is nonverbal, and that you can still get across the chocolate river without using words. All right, I'm going to go on to this next activity. This one's called Move the Rope. This is the setup. The black line's the rope. The little stick figures are human beings. So you divide the class in half and have one half stand on the rope and the other half stand on the other half. And you say, the objective of this activity is to get everybody on one side of the rope as quickly as possible. And that's it, right? And so when they're standing there like this, like one half has to move to the other half of the rope. And you say, go. And the students they'll do it pretty quick probably. And it's good to debrief that first activity by saying, like, what had to happen? And students are probably going to say things like, well, they just came and stepped over. And you'll say, well, that meant that person had to listen and you had to lead, right? Or somebody had to lead and somebody had to listen, which meant you had to look for cues in that person's behavior that they were listening, and then they had to be willing to listen to you, right? So this is really a good activity for discussing listening skills and communication strategies with your students. And just, it's like so simple, right? Just move onto their side of the rope. And then you can do it again, just like Chocolate River, no talking. And this time you're going to see students do all kinds of visual cues and things like pointing or motioning to come over here. And what can make it interesting is, you can have these students motioning to come over and the ones on the other side motioning to come over. So which side goes first? As the teacher or observer, it's kind of fun to predict what will happen here, like which side will go over to the other side of the rope. Is it the side with the most leaders in that, or the most popular students, or whatever it is? So it's cool to try to make predictions. And something else you can do as a last one is you can ask the students to make sure that everybody is on the same side of the rope. But the only way that you can do this is by moving the rope with one person. Only one person can touch the rope and move it. And the only way to do that is for that one person to take the rope and make a big circle around everybody. And that's why the game's called Move the Rope. Because that last iteration, that last version of this game is the most challenging to figure out. And if you want to make it really challenging, you could say they have to figure it out without talking. So you give the instructions, you say, okay, last version is we need to get everybody on the same side of the rope, but this time nobody can move with the exception of one person, and you can't talk. And so I'll give you 10 seconds to figure out who that one person is who is going to touch the rope. Or you could just designate that one person if you don't think your students can pick. That makes sense? I hope it does. It's called Move the Rope. Fun activity. A lot of these activities I like because you don't need a lot of materials, and so they're cheap. You don't need to go out and buy a lot of stuff. Rope, like Chocolate River, just needs some pieces of cardboard. This one's called Wah. So you get people to stand in a circle, and you have to pass around the word Wah, kind of like you're passing a ball in hot potato. So the way it works is you have your hands above your head like this, and you point to someone else in the circle, and you go, Wah! And that person, when they get pointed to and the wah hits them, they have to accept the wah by going wah and putting their hands above their head. And when they do that, it's a cue to the students on either side of them to slice sideways, wah, like that, towards their midsection, but without hitting. Make that rule clear. You don't hit people in this game. Once the sideways wahs occur, wah, they're happening to the person who's already like this. That person then will pass the wah, wah, to somebody else in the circle, and it keeps going around. And the objective of the game is to be the last two people left, because if you aren't quick enough, and this is up to the teacher's discretion, the teacher really needs to lead this activity. If you're not quick enough in doing your wah, or you forget to sideways swipe when the person next to you is doing this, then you're out, right? And so do a couple practice rounds, and then really crack down on the rules. And as they get better, expect them to be very fast. Any delays, and they're out of the activity. This one's really fun. Also, another activity where if you have a student who's not really strong with speaking English or speaking the language in the classroom, they could do this because everybody can say wah, and it's a really easy activity to learn by just watching the way it's played, right? That's probably the best way to learn it. I have found it's challenging to teach students how to play this game, but by doing a couple of practice rounds, they get the hang of it. And there really aren't a lot of rules, right? So it's not complicated. It's not like soccer or baseball where you really need to know kind of the culture and language to get super involved into the rules. Like this game's super easy. Another one, this is the last one I'm going to discuss, is called the sinking pirate ship or Castaway. So you get your students and you put them on a tarp. You give them a scenario like they're pirates. They're voyaging across the ocean and a hurricane hits and the ship starts to go down, right? And like as the ship's going down, there's less and less space on that ship for all the pirates. And you simulate that by taking the tarp and folding it up a little bit while they're standing on it. And they have to keep standing on that tarp. Everybody has to remain on the tarp. Otherwise, they fall out into the ocean and die. And if anyone dies in this scenario, then the whole team loses, right? And so the teacher will say like, oh my gosh, a rogue wave. And then the rogue wave comes in and you'll fold the tarp up a little bit more. And it gets smaller and it gets harder and harder. And eventually the students get closer and closer and closer together. And so depending on how comfortable they are with each other, and depending on how far the teacher wants to push it, you might start to see them picking each other up. And really you can see like how small you can make that tarp, and it's up to the teacher's discretion how far you're going to push making the tarp small. But it's a good game for the students to practice, again, teamwork, communication, leadership, following each other. It's great for ice breaking. And it's actually maybe not the greatest icebreaker because students can feel a little uncomfortable, but a good team building game. And it's just fun, right? You only need a tarp and some open space to play this game. It's really fun, too, to kind of rehearse a story. And really, like, regardless of the age, I feel people get into the story of the sinking pirate ship. And it could be a hurricane that's sinking it or a kraken or whatever, right? Like, play it up. Be a little dramatic. It's kind of more fun that way. Castaway is similar with the exception that the students have the tarp. And they have to move from one side of, say, the gymnasium or a soccer field to the other side without getting anybody off the tarp. And that's really challenging because, well, how do you move across an area standing on a tarp when you can't get off the tarp? Like, how do you move the tarp across the ground, right? There is a way. You have to kind of like fold the tarp and unfold it and fold it and unfold it. And if you want to make it more competitive, you could get 2 tarps and 2 teams and have them race each other. And again, just like with some of the other games, if you want to spice it up a little bit, make a rule that there's no talking. Make it a only body language type game. That's it. That's all the games I have. I picked a few out of the ones I know that I thought were really good for practicing communication, and ones where it can ask students to get out of their comfort zones, and that can create some bonding, and it can really help students who aren't from town or just new to class or whatever it is, and kind of help them feel more a part of things. And as the teacher, it can be really cool to give those students, if you think they're ready for it or a good person for it, to give them some leadership roles in these things, right? Like you could designate them the captain of the pirate ship, or you could, for example, in the Chocolate River activity, make them the person who hands out all the marshmallows to the rest of the students, right? And even if they don't feel comfortable speaking to their new classmates, they're still interacting with them by handing them the marshmallows in Chocolate River. Anyway, a few games. I hope it helps in the classroom. Have fun.